There were days when I would come home and it would be like I was out with my 2 other couple friends, and I would come home and I would just cry.
That's real. That's real.
And I did that many times. Yeah, I just feel like I spent a good portion of my 20s. I mean, you know this, obviously you're my friend, but I mean, we spent a good portion of our 20s single.
Yeah.
And doing life and providing, for ourselves, getting a job, paying rent, paying our bills, doing all this stuff. And I made it work. Was it my favorite situation? I mean, looking back, there are parts of it that I'm like, oh yeah, of this and that. But then there are other parts where I'm like, my husband just adds way too much value and sanity to my life. Like the level of emotional toil that I go through now compared to what I used to go through by myself is way less. Cause Gabe will just be like, no, snap out of it. Like, you don't need to be feeling that way, and not in a bad way, not like in a discounting my feelings way, in a helpful, productive, because he's non-emotional. He's not the same. He doesn't get as torn up into his emotions. And I'm like, like freaking out. He's like, it's okay. Like, it's going to be fine. Like, da, 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 or whatever, And so I feel like I'm way more balanced and way better because I'm in a relationship with my husband, like 1,000 times better.
I can say it was like, even if I think back to it, like, honestly, we wouldn't be having this conversation if it wasn't for my husband. I'd probably still be in corporate somewhere, striving for some pennies,
Right.
I mean, look, YouTube is its own thing. Look, it's its own struggle. That's the sidebar, but it's like, it's different. Like, I'm home, I can cook dinner and different things, and I don't have to think about like, let's get up at 5, let's have to deal with those personalities. Like, I really wouldn't be doing any of this if it wasn't for my husband. And I was like, I sat down and really thought about that one day, because it was like, I got married and it was like, damn, so much changed. This is not even emotional stuff, it's just like in a strictly life itself. And then you go online and you hear these women talking about like married women. There's one video that was like, it was saying married women are eating basically SHIT, right? Like, they're just eating crap, but they're lying about it. And happened to be a single baby mama who, I don't think she knew who the daddy was, or the daddy wasn't there. And she also worshipped white men. She said white men were better, but then was saying marriage was trash. So it's like, you obviously know there's some stuff going on there. But I'm like, you mean to tell me, both of us who have been in corporate and know the grind and the struggle of what it means.
I'd still be there. Yeah.
Yes. And like, me comparing that to here, and I can sit here and have a conversation with my friend and have a conversation with these lovely people.
Yeah.
Talk at discourse at our own leisure, and then get off here and then make dinner and Netflix and chill with our husband and relax. Like, to me, there's really that's not a comparison.
No, I wouldn't trade it for any of the good things that I experienced while I was single, because it was very lonely and I was very sad a lot.
Yeah.
A lot more than people thought, of course.
Yeah. And honestly, truthfully, I think some of the stuff that we see online is just, it's like, what's the word where they're trying to give themselves a pep talk. Like, they're trying to convince themselves that they're really not upset or that they're lonely or by themselves.
They can't be alone. That's why they're doing it. They can't be alone. They would feel too sad. I mean, there were days when I would come home and it would be like I was out with my 2 other couple friends, and I would come home and I would just cry.
That's real. That's real.
And I did that many times, many times, where I would come home and I would be like, there's no one here. I'm all alone and I'm really sad about it. And it takes a special skill to admit that.
Yep.
And a lot of these women don't want to sit down and think about how sad they are, because the amount of work that it takes to admit that you're sad, admit that you're unhappy, admit that you don't like the way that you're showing up and that you don't like who you are.
Yeah.
And then change it.
Yep.
Is much harder than going online and bitching about it and making a bunch of money off of it.
That is so true.
You know what I mean? Like, that requires much less work. it's much easier to go online and do it and go viral about this and that and then respond and then have all your issues out there. I'm not that person. Like, even coming on the show, I was like, oh my gosh, like people are going to know stuff about me and I'm like nervous. But yeah, like it took me years to figure out what I really wanted, who I really was, what I valued. And it took many tears.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. I think especially women who, because whether or not it was like directly said to us, in some ways it was modeled. It's like if you kind of grow up with that idea, like, okay, I can do this for myself, and men are dessert. Like Cher, I don't know if you ever saw that video where she was like, oh, men are dessert. You know what I mean? Like they're nice to have, but I love dessert, but like they're not essential. Like I'm fulfilled by myself. Just so that whole kind of silly ideology. So, you know, a lot of us heard that of all races, whether we got it at home or we just saw it continually perpetuated. But no one wants to talk about the nights where you're kind of driving home and you left an event, maybe at church, or maybe it's a reunion, maybe friends, and like you're the single one there and everyone else is booed up and you're like putting on a smiley face, and then you get in the car and you're like crying, like, oh my God.
Sobbing.
No one wants to talk about that stuff. Or now you're at home, you washed off your makeup, and then you're crying tears in the pillow. No one wants to talk about that. They'd rather, to your point, cry on the pillow and then go on TikTok and say, well, the reason I'm crying on the pillow, well, they won't say that, but the reason I'm upset is because blame black men. Black men aren't this, or men aren't that, or men are trash. And to your point, get that validation of other women who are also at night crying on pillows but don't want to face their truth. And then, you know, and then the cycle continues. But to your point, it's actually a lot harder to look in the mirror and be like, I actually don't like my life. I actually am doing bad by myself and I need a man. I don't want to do something like that's hard for so many people to own that, because now they have to be vulnerable. Now they have to look in the mirror and figure out, well, why don't I have what I want? Am I actually bringing something to the table? Am I actually wiping tears? Like, you have to now unpack all these things. And to your point, if you don't want to do that, it's just easier to just sometimes, in this case, blame black men and then just maybe worship white men that you will never be able to actually marry anyways. That's the easier solution.